Welcome to Chapter 10. In Chapter 10, we're going to talk about the marketing of global sports events and properties. So let's get into it. There are three basic steps to strategic marketing, at least when it comes to sports marketing. And those three we're basically going to outline here over the next few chapters. Next few videos. But these basic understanding is how we go from creating a sports brand, understanding who our consumers are, making selection of who those consumers are, and then creating a marketing mix that best suits them. So the three main steps are understanding consumer needs, and so this is our analysis of our consumer market. Then we make market selection decisions. What I mean by market selection decisions is that this is specifically our segmentation, target markets. We'll get to that in just a little while. And then our marketing mix decisions would be the 4 Ps of the marketing mix and how we create those specifically for our consumers. And so that's what we're going to talk about over the next few videos. First, in this one, we'll start with international sports marketing from a broad term, and then dive into understanding participants and spectators as consumers, and then talk about segmentation, target markets, and the marketing mix decisions. So let's get into it. What is international sports marketing? Obviously, we've been in this class for a while now, so hopefully you have a good understanding of what marketing is and sports marketing. But I wanted to use the definition of the books just to revisit that. The book defines international sports marketing as the process of creating, distributing, promoting, and pricing sports-related goods, services, and ideas to facilitate satisfying exchange relationships with consumers in specific international markets. I want to break down that definition just for a second so we kind of have a good understanding of what we're really talking about in this. The process is the first 2 words of the definition. Essentially, marketing is not simply I put up a billboard or a television commercial or I develop a product and give it to a consumer. Marketing is a series of events or a series of actions that are taking place by an organization in order to better meet the needs of consumers in their target market. And so a process is not something that's done overnight, and it takes time. The second set of words in this definition, creating, distributing, promoting, and pricing sport-related goods and services and ideas. So creating, distributing, promoting, and pricing are what we call essentially the 4 Ps of the marketing mix. Creating the product, that's what would be the first P. Distributing that product, so that would be our distribution or place marketing. Promoting, which would be promotion, and pricing, which would be the last of the 4 Ps. And then it breaks down to what are the different types of products in the sport industry, and really any industry. You have goods, which are your hard goods, things that you would produce and be able to touch and feel and see. And so a baseball itself would be a good, but baseball instruction, so batting instruction is actually a service, so it's not something you can take home with you. So we have goods, we have services, and then there's ideas or exchange of ideas. And these, again, are all done to facilitate an exchange relationship where the buyer gives up something in return for some sort of good, service, or idea. Specifically in this class, talking about the international market. And so when we get into international sports marketing, 2 of the biggest aspects of this come from global sports market, that is mega sporting events. So we have 2 things, the global sport market, which is defined as all ticketing, media, marketing, and merchandise revenue generated for all major sporting activities worldwide. And mega sporting events, which we'll talk about more in chapter in just a little while, is the large international events like the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup that take place every 2 to 4 years. And so essentially what we're looking at is the international sports marketing. Everything that is a part of marketing goes back to revenue. As you can see in the global sport market, all of these things come back to revenue generation. And so the name of the game in marketing is about revenue generation from an organizational strategic standpoint. And so let's talk about what are the different revenue sources for really any type of business, but specifically looking at some of our global sports market leaders. And so we say there's 4 basic types or main types of revenue that a sport organization will take. Essentially, what are the different revenue sources? The first one is ticketing, and this would be ticket sales to events. Or if you're talking about a global sporting event that has access to some sort of media, we're talking then about media broadcasting revenue. And this could be broadband or broadcast media. But essentially any type of revenue that comes from rights fees. And so let's take, for example, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. They receive a large sum, and we'll look at that in just a second, of revenue from broadcasting rights deals with companies around the globe. Their biggest deal comes from NBC Sports, and NBC, or NBC Universal, which includes NBC Sports. And in that, NBC is paying the IOC for the right to broadcast and have exclusive rights to broadcast the games in the United States. Same is true for other countries. I know in Germany it's the Deutsche Welle, which is the German wave, essentially is what it translates to, but it's basically a television station similar to the NBC, ABC, CBS. So ticketing revenue to events, broadcasting, so people that are spectating through some sort of media. And the third one is marketing, also known as sponsorship revenue. And sponsorship revenue in the IOC is called the TOP program. It's called the Olympic Partnership Program. It stands for TOP. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Olympics chapter. But that's another major revenue source for a lot of sport organizations. And the lifeblood of most organizations, people think, oh, it's got to be sponsorships because of the amount of money that comes in. You have to think about why does a company spend money on a sponsorship? Well, it's to be in front of consumers, their fans, so to speak, that may have similar purchasing behavior. And so the lifeblood of every sport organization is really ticket sales or ticketing, because without people in the seats, the value of the sponsorship ad on the field, or without people watching the game and the ad online or between breaks in gameplay, without those eyeballs on the sponsorships are worthless. So sponsorship and ticketing revenue oftentimes go together. And then the last aspect is part of the promotional mix aspect, and that is licensing or merchandise revenue. So if I sell a shirt with the Olympic rings on it, I have to pay the IOC depending on the deal that I have, typically 6 to 10% of every dollar that I spend, that I receive in revenue for selling that shirt on behalf of the IOC, or basically for me to be able to make a profit. So licensing revenue. And so what I'll do here is let me show you. This is the from the IOC website. It shows the revenue as well as the distribution, but we're just going to look at the revenue sources for the Olympic marketing program. And so you can see that this is the most recent update information. The Olympic marketing revenue is the majority of it, so that's what, 92% of all of the revenue that comes from the Olympic Games comes from two areas. That's broadcasting rights deals, because most people watch the Olympic Games through some sort of broadcast, obviously. And so that's a big revenue source. And then sponsorship, and typically this is done to be a official partner. We'll talk again about the Olympic Partnership Program, their TOP program. And the IOC is a little bit different because they're a mega sporting event, and very few people in the world have actually gone to an Olympic Games and watched those games. And so ticketing revenue is typically not that high, but it's 5% of their overall revenue for their events, and then 3% of it comes from licensing. But if you take this and put into, let's say, a normal or regular sports team, maybe a soccer club or a football team or whatever it may be, typically these things would shift. You would probably see less broadcasting rights deals depending on the level of play. A similar sponsorship revenue mix, but your ticket sales and your licensing would likely go up in percentage. But all that to be said, the four major revenue sources for pretty much any sport organization, and here's a good example of it, is broadcasting, sponsorship, ticketing, and licensing.